We're two members of the Senate Democratic Conference, and we are here to say that today we have actually filed petitions on 5 pieces of legislation with the appropriate committees. 4 of the bills are in the Finance Committee. 1 of the bills is Civil Service and Pensions, and we have followed the rules of the Senate to submit petitions signed by 1/3 of the members of these committees calling for a public hearing on these important bills relating to ethics. Just to make it clear, we have followed the rules correctly. We will be having a public hearing on ethics legislation when we return in May. We want our colleagues in both sides of the aisle to join us in having this public hearing, have experts on the Constitution, have experts on what is needed to be done to move forward and succeed in passing ethics legislation this session. The only thing that might go wrong is the Republicans might say, no, we are going to proactively stop you from having a public hearing on ethics legislation. And we're here to say, can you even imagine? Can you imagine? We are going to have a hearing, and they would actually try to stop us by refusing the petitions or not recognizing the rules of the Senate. Again, there are 5 specific bills that the Senate Democrats have already submitted. There are several senators who are not able to join us today who have been very active in this. One I want to recognize is Daniel Squadron, who has been a leader on ethics reform legislation in the Senate. And happily, he and his wife have just had their first child, which seems to be a very good reason not for him to be here today. But I want to give it to Gustavo Rivera to talk about some of the specific bills that he has submitted.
Good morning. Back in November of 2010, not only I got elected, but many people got elected coming up to Albany to make sure that we change the way that business is done up here. The first piece of legislation that I introduced was one of the bills that we today asked the Republicans for a public hearing on. Just really quickly, the bill that I introduced had to do with full disclosure of outside income. Senator Krueger introduced 2 bills, one dealing with stripping elected officials convicted of misusing office of their pensions, and restricting the personal use for campaign funds for personal use. Senator Adabo eliminating pay-to-play, and Senator Squadron establishing an independent commission on governmental ethics. These are all part of the pledge that 53, I will remind you, 53 out of the 62 senators that are currently in that chamber signed on to. Now, we can have a discussion about how to make these bills better. If the Republicans feel that they do not truly address the ethics that we need to have in this body, then let's have that discussion. And a place to do that is a public hearing. And according to the rules, as Senator Krueger just pointed out, we need to have a certain number of signatures of the members of these committees, and we have gotten them. So what we're asking for today is for the Republicans to come to a public hearing, to hold a public hearing, so that we can discuss how to actually change the way that the government, that we do our business up here. And we can discuss these pieces of legislation. This is what we were sent to Albany to do.
And also for the record, recently one of my Republican colleagues on the floor, when debating legislation, Senator John Flanagan, the chair of education, said, there will probably be a number of disagreements along the way, but I think we don't meet our obligation if we don't start by discussing some of that, whether it be in committee or on the floor. Well, you know what? We couldn't agree with him more. How could you imagine refusing to have a public hearing to let the public in on what we should be moving as ethics legislation? And I'm reminding you, the reason we are sharing this with you now and hoping that my Republican colleagues have reread the rules they passed in the Senate is we attempted to do this for a redistricting hearing. Twice, Senator Breslin, the ranker on the Rules Committee, submitted petitions to the all-powerful clerk of the Rules Committee, only to be told, no, the petitions were being rejected. We could not have a public hearing on independent redistricting. Well, that's outrageous enough. Are we going to play this out again? So we're here saying we're having a hearing when we come back in May. after our 2 weeks off, which some of us think we could be staying up here and doing the hearing and doing the legislation over the second week that we suddenly now are not coming up. So I'd be happy if to come up that week, to do a hearing then, to actually vote on legislation then. But we apparently don't have a lot to do, so we're going away for 2 weeks. We are having the hearing when we get back, and we really want you, the public, to ask hard questions if suddenly we're told we don't have the right to have a public hearing on ethics. Questions?
Do you have any indication that this attempt to bring a petition is going to be any different from the last attempt?
We hope not, but that's why we decided to take this moment to grab all of you, since you were all together for another important event, to say, I hope you're watching today, because we expect to get an answer today before we leave town. We have...
I mean, again, all we're doing is we're following the rules of the Senate. The rules of the Senate state that a certain number of signatures are gotten from senators that belong to a committee. Then we should be able to hold a public hearing, and that's all that we want. We want a discussion on how to make these bills better. And again, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to establish ethics reform. We've had, all of you have covered way too many scandals up here. You know that this is an issue. We know that this is an issue, and certainly, hopefully, the Republicans know it's an issue. So let's all together, let's sit down, let's have a conversation in public about how we change the way that we do business so that we can actually make this a body that people will respect.
Senator, is this an effort to embarrass the Republicans now they're back in the majority?
This is an effort to tell them that they should keep their pledge, they should keep their promise, and they should follow the rules. If we're going to say, we're back in 2000, back in November of last year, when they were promising things for the campaign, they said that they were going to do a whole bunch of things, including redistricting, ethics reform, etc. So this is, if they're embarrassed, it's on them. What we're saying is keep your promise, pass the pledge, and in this case, hold public hearings that you have told us that we can hold if we get a certain number of signatures.
How does this fit in with Governor Cuomo trying to get a deal with Senator Skelos and Assembly Speaker Shelton?
Well, it fits in perfectly because we know that the governor is serious about wanting to move ethics legislation. We've been told that Sheldon Silver in the Assembly has actually agreed to an outline of a plan. It seems to be the Senate who is not moving on this and won't even be having a public discussion of it. Again, we think a public hearing to get the issues on the table may be the reason Senator Skelos isn't comfortable with moving forward is because he disagrees with the governor and Speaker Silver. Wouldn't we like to know what the details are? Wouldn't it be a healthy thing to have a public hearing and Senator Skelos could come and outline his position? Senator Rivera and I could come and outline our position, and the public could hear the dispute. It's healthy to have disputes. That's good. That's what we're supposed to do. So again, if anybody's embarrassed about not wanting to have a public hearing, you know what? I think you should be embarrassed if you're not prepared to do your work in public and have a public hearing on these important issues.
Senators, is this something that your constituents have told you is a concern of theirs, only because it seems like people are more concerned about, say, jobs or the rent regs or a property tax cap in the suburbs and upstate? Is this something that your constituents care about at all?
Absolutely. It is the reason I am up here. I don't have to remind you about who I replaced. And I'll tell you something else. During the primary, when I defeated Pedro Espada, we actually doubled the percentage of turnout. So we actually got more people to come out that were interested in this. Of course, people are interested in making sure that their government works, that the government responds to them. The people that represent them truly represent them. So yes, I've certainly heard from my constituents on this.
Senators, a new poll out today shows that a majority of voters polled still overwhelmingly or to a majority disapprove of the job that the legislature is doing. How far would ethics reform go to cleaning up the image, at least, of the legislature?
I think it goes a long way. There's a reason why the public has a distrust of the legislature. There have been bad apples. I admit it. We've been getting rid of the bad apples, but the only way you really ensure a clean operation going forward is to have the right laws on the books. That is why our conference feels so strongly we need to have strong, clear ethics laws. And the fact is, everyone knows New York State has loopholes you could drive trucks through currently for legislators.
Some of those trucks filled with sushi.
Could you speak to the possible irony in the fact that these will be going through the Finance Committee, a committee that, of course, used to be chaired by Carl Krueger, who now has his own ethics problems?
There is no question that Carl Krueger has his own ethics problems, and of course he has been removed by John Sampson as even being the ranker on finance. I was very proud to be named the ranker on finance about a month ago. And yes, Senator Rivera referencing that his predecessor, a man named Pedro Espada, is not here, and he is, because the people of his district do care about ethics. They made it loud and clear in the election when they threw out Pedro Espada and replaced him with Gustavo Rivera. You know what? If Carl Krueger was running today, I bet the people of his district would not be voting for him, as it should be. But again, if we had stronger laws, if we had more transparency in the information that we had to provide people, maybe some of these people, both parties, both houses, this is not a partisan issue, would have been thrown out of here a lot earlier.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Hurts, right?